So the government saw off that attempt to take over the Commons timetable, which would potentially have given MPs the chance to bind the hands of the new PM and stop no deal or prorogation. Now, prorogation is the way a session of Parliament is ended, sending MPs and peers away from Westminster, usually for just a few days. It's a power exercised by the Queen on the advice of the government, and some MPs fear the new PM could use it to enable no deal by simply keeping them out of the way. So, having failed to take over the Commons timetable to stop that happening, what options do those opposed to no deal have left, and what are the legal implications of all of this? Well, they were questions I put to barrister Sam Fowles, and first to Jack Simpson-Caird from the Bingham Centre for the Rule of Law.
I think it's not quite clear what the options are. I think the problem is that one of the reasons Labour took this opportunity, or attempted to take this opportunity to secure more of the parliamentary timetable, is that it's not certain that there will be many other opportunities, precisely because they're running out of opposition days, the days in which there is some time set aside for the opposition to have some parliamentary time. It's not clear whether or not the government will give the opposition any more opposition days between now and exit day on the 31st of October. So I think that's why there was this sense that they had to act.
Let's assume that we do look like we're heading for a no-deal Brexit, and we have a Prime Minister who thinks that one of the ways this can be achieved is by proroguing Parliament. At what point do the courts get involved, and what could they do?
Well, firstly, there's courts will not want to get involved in this. This is not the sort of thing you usually see the courts getting involved in, because the Constitution is a very delicate balance between Parliament and the courts try and give Parliament as much sort of leeway as possible to make its own decisions, because Parliament's considered sovereign. However, if the Prime Minister was to try and use his or her own powers to stop Parliament being involved in a decision, then that might be the tipping point. And I think there's two ways the courts might get involved. Of course, ultimately, proroguing Parliament is the Queen's job. It's the royal prerogative. But you can review the royal prerogative in some limited situations. One of these, as was held in the Miller case, which was the case that said Parliament had to vote on Article 50, and that is to review the extent of the power. So you can't say, oh, she's used it in the wrong way, but you can say the power doesn't extend that far. And the other way is to look at the Prime Minister's advice and say, is the Prime Minister able to give advice to prorogue Parliament? So the question for the courts will be, does the Queen's royal prerogative extend to proroguing Parliament to exclude it from being involved in a major constitutional decision, no deal Brexit, or does the Prime Minister's power extend to advising the Queen to do that? If the court decides their powers don't extend that far, then the court may be able to say, well, Your Majesty, well, Prime Minister, you've gone too far, you're not allowed to use your power in that way.
But would they be able to do that fast enough to stop us heading out of the door on the 31st of October?
Well, technically, yes. The courts can act in advance in these situations. They can give an injunction, or they can give a ruling in advance. Practically, that is very, very difficult.
And could the Commons and the Lords, could Parliament pass a law to limit the scope of prerogative powers and therefore stop this proroguing of Parliament in this instance?
I think that sort of legal instrument is possible, is feasible. There are plenty of examples where Parliament has passed laws to limit the prerogative power. That's certainly possible. But I think we just come back to this fundamental point that our system depends on shared understandings on core principles, parliamentary sovereignty, the rule of law, separation of powers. And really what we need to work out is whether or not the new Prime Minister will respect those values as much as the previous one did.
And Sam, what kind of precedent does all this set? Where does this leave us?
Well, I think if they were to go that far, if they were to be pro-parliaments, then that's a very worrying precedent for a democratic body. And there's a lot of arguments about, well, that all they'd be doing is fulfilling the mandate that was given in the 2016 election. But I think that's actually quite a worrying argument from a sort of first principles perspective as well, because it implies that democracy sort of stopped in 2016, which of course it didn't. And it's essential to democracy is the right of everyone to change their minds if we decide to. We're allowed to be contrary.
All right, Jack, last one to you. Of course, the other big issue is the clock is ticking. Parliament is due to go into recess at the end of July. It's quite possible that one way or another with an extension of something as simple as parliamentary recesses, MPs could be kept away until the end of September. That's
a core point. I think the issue of prorogation that people are missing is that ultimately the government controls the parliamentary timetable. So I don't think that anyone that really wanted a no deal would actually have to resort to prorogation. I think that you could simply just not schedule any opportunities, not schedule any opposition days, as I started out by saying, or simply programming other business, or not sitting on particular days. Ultimately, in our system, the executive is largely in control of parliamentary business, and that could very much be the reason that Parliament has limited opportunities to stop no deal.
All right, we will wait and see what happens, but for now, Jack Simpson-Caird and Sam Fowles, thank you both very much for coming onto the programme.
Thank you.
Thank you.